Welcome to the Shortwave Radio channel, and a little bit of a story here. I'm in story mode today a little bit in my stories of shortwave. So, of course, what you see here at the top is the realistic DX100. This is what started my radio passion, literally. Although I really had a little passion because, we had multi-band radios that I used before this. But this was the first radio that really started everything. It's kind of interesting to see how, when I tune it today, how we can say the word, how crappy it is as a performer compared to even, the cheapest portables today. But it was my radio, and I was happy, and I always, I remember looking at it and thinking how cool it looked. So this was purchased in August of 1982. So this August will be 38 years that I've been actively and seriously listening to shortwave. And what made this probably, what saved this radio is the fact that in 1982, the amount of broadcasts on shortwave were really, really high. We were still in, we were past the peak of solar cycle, but we were still in high solar activity. So there was a lot to listen to. And this radio could get, since it, it wasn't a DX machine really, but it could get what was the strong signals out there. There were so many of them that I had the impression that this box was a killer radio that was so good at receiving signals. It's later that you notice that wasn't as good as it I thought. If I had below it, you see a part of my ICOM, my CRD 8500. If I had that instead, I would have DX'd really a lot more probably. But it started everything, and it made me listen to shortwave. My first evening, I'm trying to remember my first evening of listening. So, I don't know. It was a weekday. I remember it's a weekday, and but I don't remember which day it is, but it's a weekday. And I remember that, I plugged this in and used a little telescopic on it, thanks to the fact that in 1982, electronics are pretty quiet, and there's not a lot of electronics actually in a home in 1982. You got your TV, you got a few little things, but think about it. Pretty much nobody has computers and stuff. There's not all of these, devices running, and almost everything is. The phone. I still had that rotary phone that plugged in directly to the socket of the phone company. We have very little electronics actually when you think about it, and it's all analog. And when I plugged this in, the only electronics in the room was the TV, the stereo system, and I'm trying to remember if there's anything else. I think that's pretty much resumes the electronics we have in the home. So there's no noise. So with the telescopic indoors and the strong signals and the fact that there's no noise, this thing's receiving tons of signals. And a few of the signals I remember from the first evening. I remember listening to Call Israel English language broadcast. I remember Radio Berlin International. And trying to remember what else. I probably stumbled upon WRNO, which back then was called the Rock of the World, and was a rock music station on shortwave. And I was learning. I probably, in that evening, went through the manual and read it at least a dozen times, over and over and over. Grasping and getting all the information I can from it. That also helped a lot. It's something we don't have today. That radio had the manual was not very big. It was, 10 pages, 12 pages or something. But in those 12 pages, you had the basic operations of the radio. You had what shortwave is all about. You had a rundown of the different bands with, so they would tell you, these are the international broadcast bands. These are the utility bands for aeronautical communications. These are the maritime bands. These are the amateur bands. So that was just enough for me to understand, oh, so these are the places where you hear stations. These are the places where I'll hear other types of communications. And curious as I was, one of the things that I did all the time, and I still do today, and I think that is what makes the hobby interesting, is learning not to just stay in one place, but to really go around and listen everywhere. My main interest was, I remember I would take, there was that switch, the band A, B, C, D switch, which A was the AM broadcast band. B was, 1.8 to 4.5 megahertz, something like that. C was 4.5 to 12 megahertz, and D was like 12 to 30 megahertz. I would always, and I would do it all the time, I would go down to A, I would go through the AM broadcast band, then move to B, and continue tuning up and seeing what I can hear in the 2-3 megahertz ranges. Then C, going to the other ranges, and I would go all the way up to 30 megahertz, even when there was nothing, because I still didn't understand a lot of it, and I still didn't understand much of the day-night pattern and solar activity and all. I would tune all the time, and I was always amazed at any little signal I could get in here. I still, found it so cool to listen to shortwave with all of this. So that's a little story I wanted to add on my first encounter with my realistic DX100 that started everything. If you enjoy our videos, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Thank you for watching.